Welcome back, Day Camp friends, to episode 10 of the Day Camp Pod. I'm Andy Pritikin, Director of Liberty Lake in the Philadelphia suburbs of New Jersey.
I'm Sam Thompson. I'm from Crystal Lake Park District, northwest of Chicago.
And I'm Ehren from Camp Robin Hood, located just outside of Toronto in Canada.
We're camp professionals joining forces to provide a forum for day camp pros to share ideas and best practices across North America and beyond. And for today's episode, we will be giving you a greatest hits of best practices that we've gleaned from our time at both the Ontario Camp Conference and ACA National in Nashville just last week. But first, the Day Camp Podcast is brought to you by CRS, Commercial Recreation Specialists, who I saw last week in Nashville, Rich Wills, LeMan. They're fine purveyors of the best waterfront, water fun, and splash pad products in the world. Check them out at crs4rec.com. CRS is serious about fun. And this Go Camp Pro podcast is also sponsored in part by the American Camp Association, New York and New Jersey, dedicated to preserving, promoting, and enhancing the quality of the summer camp experience. Their professional development includes the one and only Tri-State Camp Conference, as well as many other conferences that can be found at acanyny.org. All right, so today's episode is, we're calling it the 2019 Winter Conference Takeaways, all right? Some of us aren't so lucky to be able to go to some conferences. Fortunately, the three of us have recently been to these conferences, and we've taken some decent notes. So our idea is to share them with you, some of the greatest hits of what we have gotten. But we make no assumptions on the Day Camp pod here. And so for those of you who have never been to any of these big-ish conferences, I want to just talk for a minute about why these conferences are so awesome. All right. So Sam, you've been going to the national conference for a bunch of years now.
Yes.
Right? Can you tell us why you go every year?
It's so packed full of information that you don't feel bad about working 11 hours a day because you want to hear everybody's ideas. So you get all these wonderful professionals from camps similar to yours, camps different, and then the main speakers. It just is great for networking and for lots of development for me.
Yeah, no doubt. Ehren, what are your thoughts traveling into the Great White North up there? Where was the Ontario Camp Conference, by the way?
So fortunately, the conference is, I can almost walk there. It's very close to me.
I wanted you to say
Great White,
Saskatchewan or something like that.
I wish we had some opportunities to see Canada, but Ontario has the biggest collection of camps in the country, so they tend to base the conference in the Toronto area most of the time, and so it was a great experience to be part of it. As always, just love the opportunities to network and to share ideas, and we have a good time too. The sessions are interactive, and it's like being part of a part of the pre-camp experience that our staff have almost for a whole bunch of competitors who are also friends, who also work together, who also work against each other sometimes. It's just an interesting, great dynamic to be a part of.
Yeah, I agree. I was a school teacher for 5 years before I became a full-time camp professional. And I remember going to my first camp conference, Tri-State Camp Conference, about 20 years ago. And I felt like I learned more in my first day at that camp conference than I did in 5 years of in-service sessions as a teacher. Like Sam said, very interactive sessions and just real practical stuff and stuff that works in all phases of your life too. You could take some stuff home from a Jeff Likens session and apply it to your family like immediately. For those who are teachers or rec professionals, you can take it back to your regular jobs, not just in a camp setting per se. And we'll talk about how the camp setting doesn't mean much anymore, right? It can mean a million things. And also, something you guys alluded to is a networking. For someone like me and Sam, who have been doing this for a long time, I don't know if you'll agree with me or not, Sam, but I find that I learn just as much at these conferences in between sessions or at night or at breakfast than I do at the sessions. And that's not putting the sessions down. There's awesome sessions. But to meet people who do what you do in all different ways, and to be able to talk with them informally. It's not just commiserating about crazy staff and crazy people. It's talking about like how like you do things, and maybe all the camps in your area do things a certain way, and then you talk to somebody from California and it's like totally out to lunch different, right? And yet just as great in many ways. And as I've been doing this now, my 22nd year as a full-time camp professional, I think that most of my closest friends are now camp professionals. And anytime I go to ACA National, I gain a few more. We're camp people, super nice people in an area trapped in a convention hall, right? Going out for drinks later. You just make some really close friendships at these things of some, similarly minded, awesome people. I really
and the great and sorry, the other great thing is that if you've ever been to any other industry type trade shows for other industries, it's not filled with like 99% fun people. And so that's the other great thing is these people that you get to go out with at night. It's not just a formal drink sitting at a table with a few people. It's everyone has fun. Everyone gets to know each other, dress up in costumes. We had one costume night, as part of the evening program. So it's just a lot of fun to do camp things with adults.
Yeah, well, we're a unique group of people, and I always crack up at when I go to these conferences, especially at ACA National, which is in a different city every year. When I get in my first cab or Uber ride, and inevitably the driver says, "What kind of conference is this that you're having?" Like, I'm taking around the nicest people I've ever met, I'm like, we're camp people, man. That's how it works, right? But something also that Ehren alluded to, which is very unique to our industry, is that you go to these sessions and people are sharing, just like we do here on the Day Camp Pod, by the way, sharing their deepest, most awesome ideas from their camps with everybody, right? And I think that when you go to a widget conference or whatever it is, they're not really doing that because everybody's so competitive with each other. And I'm not saying that we're not competitive with each other, but I think there's an overall spirit in camping that if we elevate everybody, that's better for everyone, right? If everybody's telling their friends at work how great camp is, there's more of a chance that their kids are going to go to camp. And I say it all the time. The updated info from ACA National is 1 out of every 4 kids goes to camp in America. All right, so it's a lot of kids. Most people don't do this camp thing, so we have to figure out ways to get them to do it, right? So
Absolutely.
Professional development is important. All right, but you guys are listening to the Day Camp Pod, so you all know that. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to go around a circle and talk about some of the cool stuff that we saw. I think let's start with, I'm going to start with me and Sam with the Day Camp Cafe in Nashville. So Michael Brandwine has this wonderful annual tradition where he makes us wake up at 5:30 in the morning, hungover on the second day of the conference, to go to a roundtable kind of situation where folks like Sam and myself are in charge of tables with different topics, and then it goes around, and then they do like a musical chairs thing, like every I don't know what, 20 minutes, 15 minutes, they rotate it around. And I have met some of the coolest, strange kind of camps, like out of the ordinary kind of camps at this thing. And you really get a sense that, in this day camp world, a lot of the people listening here they have some very non-traditional kinds of camps, right? I think the definition of day camp nowadays means a summer program for children that takes place during the day, period. It could be anything, right? The woman that sat immediately next to me at the Day Camp Cafe at 7 a.m. was this lovely lady who runs the day camp at the Honolulu Zoo. All right.
Wow.
And as you can imagine, she has very unique logistics involved in her camp that I was unable to resolve much of. But also, it's still camp. And for the kids that live in Honolulu, if there's not any traditional kind of camps out there and that's it, then guess what? That's it, right? Just like a lot of the kids that come to our day camps may never go to sleepaway camp, right? To us, it's the same thing. We're their gateway in to this thing called camp. So
here in Chicago, the Botanical Garden has a camp, as well as the Brookfield Zoo and the aquarium. And I think we found some sports centers that came to our session talking about their sports center. We had government ones. We had every organization you can think of. Definitely unusual.
Yeah, yeah. I think, well, unusual to us, maybe, Sam, right?
Yeah.
But, I think that what I learned is that speaking for myself, I felt like a dinosaur. I felt like my camp is almost more of an outlier now than the norm, which is interesting. I felt the same way when I started in camping. Most resident camps were full season. Kids went all summer, right? And now it's 1 week, 2 week, 3 weeks, and that's the norm. So I think specialized camps seem to be more of the way that things are going. All right, so I'll go first with my first little thing. I do at Liberty Lake. I do 60 to 70 tricky tray auctions a year that we give away free week of camp kind of things to local schools, sports teams, whatever, charities, nonprofits, right? It's a good way to get it out. And one of the people at our table had a great suggestion that when you agree to doing this, that you send the organizations a artwork and a blurb for them, and your URL for the PTOs or the mom groups, whoever the organization is, to post on their Facebook pages and then on their social media as a sort of added value thing for you, and also a way to show everybody that you're doing it, and then you can share it as well. So I thought that was a good one.
That is good. I was at the inclusion table, and we had decided to hand out index cards, and as we met people, get them to write down something that they did well, because each of us has something that we're really good at. And Sophie Brinkley from the Indianapolis YMCA's has a great accommodation process form that she would be willing to share. So we have some of those activities and some of the contact information for those people who wanted to share their good ideas with you. And those will be in the notes of the podcast.
Awesome. All right, let's go to Canada. Go ahead, Ehren.
So something interesting, a couple interesting things about the conference that that were great from just an overall standpoint. We had there was a lot of interactive keynote sessions. So there were just a lot of focus on singing and music and some drumming. So there was basically those three different topics that I just spoke about were each made up a different keynote, and there was an amazing group that performed and basically provided drums for the entire room, and it was a drum cafe. I actually just trying to find the name of the performers, but they were just amazing. Like, it was just exactly the way a room full of camp people you would expect them to be, in that situation where nothing was said, everyone just walked in, sat down. There was no introduction. It was just like these guys were on stage, they started drumming, and people just picked up the drums and started joining in, and there was like it was all body language, and it was all actions, and no verbal instructions, and it just became like such a cool way to start off the day and start off the conference and have everyone come together. And so it was just like we were saying before, just only camp people can kind of buy into that kind of thing the way that this room did. But it was amazing. And then we ended the conference in a similar way with a group called Choir that these guys started off playing in bars, and they just they're fairly talented, and they have great energy and great great song choices. And they basically involve the audience in a performance of a song that one guy's playing guitar, the other guy's sort of the maestro, and and it was just a cool a cool way to tie the beginning and the end together and be interactive in doing so. And it was done intentionally, I think, because of the fact that we had the theme of the sponsor of the keynote was Kumbaya 1994, which was an international camping congress event that happened in Toronto. It was like a culmination of a large group of I think it was actually in place of the national conference that year, where they they were able to convince a bunch of Americans to come up to our crazy cold country and spend a week with us doing all this, camp conferencey stuff. And so they paid tribute to the Kumbaya conference through that drum performance and the closing session, and it was great to learn a little bit about all the great collaboration that happened then. And I think it was a tipping point for a lot more collaboration between Canada and the U.S. in the camping industry. So it was cool to learn about all that stuff and to meet some of the people. And there's a bunch of people that were involved in the original steering committee that were still there that came up to be part of this to commemorate and relive some of those great moments and watch some old video footage of Michael Brandwein speaking and performing and doing his thing.
Yeah, his
Um,
thing.
Andy, I thought of a quote. A friend of mine had to leave Thursday night, and she sent me this text that kind of puts it in a nutshell. She said, "My feet are tired, my head hurts, my heart is full. I miss my dog. See you next year."
Yeah, I think your friend put that on Facebook. I saw that.
Yeah, yeah, it was
That was
awesome.
pretty classic.
You do leave the conference kind of feeling like like the last day of camp, when camp ends and you have that like hole in your heart, you're missing everybody, that three days of like just intense bonding and being part of this thing. You leave with that same kind of feeling that you have at camp. It's great.
Yeah, it's tired.
I love that.
It's tired. It's cathartic, and you end up missing your dog. I agree with all those things. So one of the people that luckily sat next to me at the Day Camp Cafe that I met at Day Camp Cafe about 4 or 5 years ago is Laura Twiggs Johnson, who we're going to have on the Day Camp pod in a couple of weeks, talk about the kind of cool stuff she does. And there was another young lady at our table that was wearing a shirt that said, "What do you do the rest of the year?" All right, I love that. It's greatest question we all get. And we were joking around saying our little responses to that. And Twigs looked at me and said, "I'll tell you what I do the rest of the year. I am an e-commerce sales professional." And I was like, "What do you mean?" And she's like, "Well, think about it. I'm selling camp through my website. I'm managing 7 websites. She's got 7 small camps. And she gets people to sign up to camp." Right. As a matter of fact, just to exemplify that, she loves sailing. That's her hobby. She spent 4 months this fall on a boat in the Puget Sound in Washington State, right? Running these 7 websites and signing kids up to camp. Okay. So again, camp is a lot different than it used to be, right? And, I met another guy named Jeremy from Big Fish Sports Camps out in Knoxville. He also, multiple camps. They're not that big, but there's a lot of different operations and a lot going on at them, and just very impressive. So a few things from Twigs, because I could write pages of things just from talking to her. She's just so fascinating. Every Monday afternoon, because new kids start every Monday, right? She sends an email, and of course, when I say she sends, this is Twigs. Her system sends this automated. Okay, she doesn't have to do anything. It's all set up. Sends an email to all the kids' parents as soon as they leave that basically says, "How did camp go today?" And give them a forum, to respond to that on the first day. And I'm sure that there's a lot of camp people out there that would be scared to do that. But I think it's a courageous thing. I have another friend, Ross Coleman at Coleman Camps. He makes his leadership team stay on Mondays and call every single new kid. As a matter of fact, I take that back. He wants his directors to do it, his director team, because it could be something that could be tough to hear, and also it's a personal touch kind of thing. But I think providing that kind of thing, providing that kind of ability, to the environment to have that kind of feedback is very, very millennial. It's very like transparent and not trying to hide anything, and I think that's what people want. So I love that. She also does a weekend photo blog. So at the end of the week, instead of posting hundreds of photos, at the end of the week, she makes a blog of photos of things that happened during the week with little explanations of things that happened. So the parents can sort of see on the weekend, "Oh, this is what you did at camp," with some pictures, which I think is super cool.
That is cool.
Yeah. One last thing, because I know she's going to be on the podcast in a couple of weeks. She has a referral program called I Refer. right? It's an actual program. And you can set it up so that it refers, but your people use it to send that link out to their friends. And if those people use it and sign up, those people get credit. And she has it set up so that the first time someone uses that link, they get to choose a t-shirt, right? And they get a t-shirt sent to them. The next time they get a chunk of money off of their, off of their balance or a credit towards their account. The next time, a bigger chunk of money, right? And it's called I Refer, referral program. Pretty cool. If you want to check out her websites is leadershipacademyllc.com. It's pretty neat. Like I said, it's like 7 different camps: a sailing camp, a riding camp, et cetera, et cetera. And all are, if you put yourself into that pipeline as an inquiry, you'll be pretty impressed, I have to say. All right, heading off to you, Sam.
All right. So do you want me to go to the Kahoot or some other things that I learned along the
We're
way?
just looking for some cool best practices. We're not going to do a program skill of the week because that's all we're doing is program tidbits here. Okay, we're riding this baby to the end.
All right. Although I did find one of those, so I'll slip it in
We'll
there
use it
somewhere.
next time. Or slip it in, whatever.
So we talked about at the inclusion table about phones for diabetics because it monitors their health. And so if you have a no phone policy, what do you do about that? How do you hear it on the bus? That kind of thing. We also talked about the surprise people showing up with a need and not letting you in on it. I went to a couple other sessions. One of my favorite things that I got was from Ruby, Gabs, and Beth. They were talking, their session was on returning staff. And so how do you develop them while you're also doing the new staff and what to get them involved with? And they had this one activity that was called Sun and Shadow. So you got a yellow circle and you wrote on it, what are the kids I'm most comfortable working with? What type of kids? And we all have our preferences. And then on the blue, you get a blue dot. And on the blue one, you put those children that you're really not comfortable working with or that you just don't feel confident with. So then what you do is you find somebody whose shadow side matches your sun side. And then you give them advice. So if I like teens and you hate teens, you would find me and I would say, well, here are some things you could do that I do that work, and vice versa. I could say, I really don't like working with peewees, and you could say, they're my favorite. This is what I do. So that was one that I'm definitely using this summer. So I also went to a medical one, a mesh one. One of the things happening for everybody right now is that communicable diseases are coming back full force because a lot of people are not immunizing. So you need to have a level in your camp. It's called a herd level of immunizations to keep it from going rampant in your camp. So when you let somebody in who's not immunizing, they have to have a doctor's note now because it's more of a risk to the whole herd if you don't have that many immunized. Another thing we
talked about. Hang on. Let's save some.
Okay.
Don't exhaust yourself. All right, we're going back to Canada.
so up here, it's still cold right now, even though I'm not saying much. It's just causing my voice to slow down. So one of the focuses that one of the things I focused on a lot of the sessions I attended were marketing, and Andy, you just mentioned that one of the colleagues that you met just spend she's a marketing professional, and that's really that is what we are. And so we do focus a lot of our energies on marketing. And so Travis Allison, of course, presented some great things about marketing, as did a couple other presenters. But some great takeaways for me were just really defining the thinking about and defining the elevator sales pitch for, for what we do, and, and being able to differentiate your camp from other camps in a concise, value statement, as some people call it, and, being able to do that efficiently and regularly, and not to change the messaging, and just to have a really, really good statement that you can reiterate, and that you can train the people who who are communicating with parents regularly on. So a lot of times, we spend a lot of time obviously training our staff during pre-camp, and the people who are on the phones don't always participate in our pre-camp training, and if they do, they're not, we're not focusing our training on on marketing and communication necessarily. Very few of our staff have a lot of communication involvement with our parents, right? So I think I think that something that hit me is that we need to really focus more on our training, intentional training of how to communicate with parents. Our youngest staff need that training more than anybody. Obviously, their communication skills, but when it's not through through Instagram or other social media channels, is not always what we would hope for. And so being able to incorporate communications training into our staff training is important, and focusing just on keeping all the people that are on the phones on the same page, like myself included, being someone that's in the office answering the phones and being able to deliver the same messages as everybody else is delivering is important, so that we can just be on point with what we're doing. And part of that is being familiar or developing a mission statement, or being comfortable with the mission statement, and then going from there and saying that in a more concise way. And how do how do we differentiate ourselves from the other camps? I think I just said that, but being clear about what those value propositions are. And one other interesting thing that continues to deliver that message could be just maintaining, like we all maintain social media presence online, and we're trying to, there's lots of tools where you can see, help you see what to post on any given day, whether it's highlighting a holiday or a special, specialty day. Hamburger Day is today, and today is National Hamburger Day in Canada. Not actually today, but they have things like that. And so we could say, hey, posting on social media, hey, National Hot Hamburger Day in Canada. Can't wait to have hamburgers around the barbecue. That's a classic way of tying things in. But there's a lot of other things we can do to stay on the fresh in the minds of parents, and just being actively involved in the community was something that came out of a good discussion that was had in one of the sessions. Where we brainstormed some different things that that could be done. Whether it's providing a community service, a program, doing a volunteering for a charity, getting a bunch of your staff together to volunteer with the under the guise of your camp, something related to childcare is or family life is a good way to start when you choose a charity. Something like providing a babysitter service for parents, adds value to what your camp does, and can keep our staff employed throughout the year and connected to us, and deliver value to parents and staff alike. So things, there was some great ideas like that came up in this marketing session that I'm referring to, and it was just there were some light bulbs going off for me that spawned some other ideas.
Yeah,
teaching kids how to ride a bike, right? Having a bike riding teaching program in the park on the first Saturday of June or whatever it is, something like that could be cool.
Oh, heck yeah. So, well, as I've told you before, teaching kids how to ride a bike in camp is very successful, that I have found, if you spend money on the bikes. One of the things that came up a lot with the day camp stuff was the $15 minimum wage, how that's going to start affecting people. Are you going through anything like that in Canada, or you guys are?
We just implemented the $14 minimum wage last year, and that was a big change from $11.25, I think it was before that, to $14. So it was a huge jump, and they were the 15 minimum wage is now on hold. It was supposed to be coming down the pipeline, but change of government, change of change of priorities now. So we're going to see where that goes. But the $14 minimum wage definitely was a shock to a lot of the financials.
Yeah. It's a bummer for us, and it's a big thing with overtime. If you're subjected to overtime, that's real tough. But even just regular day camps, even if you don't have to pay $15 minimum wage, if you're exempt from it, if Burger King is paying people $15 minimum wage, then it's just part of the new reality. I mean, it's just the way it is. So one of the things that was brought up a lot was the internships. Creating real internships at your camps. So that you can potentially, the kids can get college credit, and potentially you don't have to pay them $14 and $15 a minimum wage at the same time. And and there is workforce development monies out there from various government agencies too that you can apply for.
I love that idea. I think I was thinking along. I just printed out like the whole the education ministry's guidelines with cooperative learning and all and experiential learning, and I'm trying to see if we can develop some type of a program here and work with some other camps to get some buy-in from the school boards, because it would be amazing if we could incorporate some of that into what we're doing, rather than trying to fight the minimum wage. Just providing value that doesn't exist in other jobs, right?
Yeah. Well, the most successful people out there will tell you that these challenging situations, you should look at the opportunities that they create, right? And that's what we have to do with that kind of thing. One of the best sessions I went to was a Scott Arizala session that it was about creating community during staff training, and he based it all on things that his 5 or 6 year old says, which was super cute. One of the things he mentioned was that when Scott goes to a camp and looks around, one of the first things he tries to notice is how much seating there is, how many places there are to sit. And because he is convinced the best camps have the most places to sit, because when you're sitting, you're talking and you're creating informal conversation areas. I just thought that was a very poignant observation by him.
That is interesting.
He talked about the art of making mistakes and highlighting mistakes and debriefing mistakes and making mistakes out loud, right? And that, the older we get, in a way, the more dumb we realize we are about stuff, because, we realize things more. Another thing from his kindergarten child, in his son's class, when a kid comes to the teacher and asks them a question, the teacher points to the wall where there's a sign that says, "Ask 3 before you ask me." So ask the kid, did you ask 3 other kids before you asked me this question? And I thought that was a really cool day camp tool.
Right? That is cool.
Good takeaway.
Love that.
He was talking about, the Generation Z kind of people that communicate so well on their phone, but not necessarily face to face. But he says, maybe they're really good at communication. They're just good at multitask kind of communication, He talked about Snapchat and how he didn't really understand it, right? He doesn't do it. He didn't understand it. He was asking his 15-year-old nephew about it. And he said, explain this to me. And the kid said, well, when you're sitting on the couch with your friend talking about stupid stuff? And he's like, yeah. And he's like, that's what Snapchat is, except you do like dozens of people at the same time. And it's like, wow, that's actually really neat. So his challenge to us is like, how do we incorporate that kind of thinking? How do we talk to each other like you're using your phone, except at camp, right? How do you utilize all these different facets of what you do? All this little keeping in touch with people, telling people that was cool, and I like that, and all that kind of thing. Like, how do you talk to each other like you're using your phone at camp? Right? I just thought it was a very deep question, right? How do we snap or Insta with each other without doing it? What's the emoji for that, right? I've heard many camps that do orientation training and have a part where they create memes for things, right? Or they take pictures and say, make that into a meme, right? It was very poignant, and he was using it as an example on your phone. when you go to see what the temperature is, right? So Ehren up in Canada right now looks at his phone and well, actually he uses different Fahrenheit and Celsius. It's going to be confusing. So Sam out there in Chicago,
Cool. Cool.
and she's looking at her thing right now, and it says 30 degrees Fahrenheit, right? But then next to it, it says feels like 12 degrees, right? I don't know about you, Sam. It's really windy
Yeah.
in New Jersey
Yeah.
today. Crazy windy. So he said, think about that in terms of communication. Temperature is like words, right? Feels like is like the real deal. That's like what it actually is.
Yeah.
Words say one thing, but feels like is actually what it really is.
That's
So
a good analogy.
yeah, I thought
I
that was
like
pretty
it.
cool. And the last little cool thing, I mean, there's lots of good stuff, but last one I want to tell you is when you go around and you're managing people and you're asking how it's going, right? The, the initial thing that people will respond to you is telling you something that's wrong, something that's bad, something that's troubling, right? A challenge, right? So he says that when you walk around, program yourself to say to people, not how's this going, but what's going well. Just go up to it and say, what's going well? Start on a positive note. Let's talk about good stuff before we start delving into
That's nice.
into the dirt. All right, handing
Cool.
it back to you, Sam.
All right. I went to one on servant leadership, and they said most people quit jobs because of their boss, and that 70% of this generation wants meaningful work. So we have to be really good at not only giving them the tools to do their job, so in essence, we're serving them as well as the kids in a way that we're just maximizing their production. You know, we're getting them what they need. But we also have to sell why. They want to know the why. We've got to sell the why. So that was all good. But he also had a funny cat herding video, which you can find, and I'm going to find it for staff training. It was hilarious because working at Pee Wee camp is herding cats. You know, those little guys are like all over the place, but that was hilarious. So I'm going to look for that video to use this year. Couple more camp training tools. I did a networking session, and I was going to use Kahoot, where you can set up a game show, but that's better for the end of training to see how much people retained. It's kind of a fun way to end with prizes. So then I switched to Padlet, which is a way to not only pick your subjects from what everyone wants to talk about, so they get on the program on their phone, they put in what they want to talk about, whatever gets biggest is what you talk about first, and then they can also anonymously put in their ideas on the board in the conversation, so nobody is left out of the brainstorming. So I'll just show you what it looks like, and it's free for the first 3 ones that you want to do. And then after that, I believe you have to sign up and pay for it. But you can also share it with everyone later. So I've got, you know, all the results of what everybody put up, and I could share that with whoever came, so they didn't have to take pictures of the screen while you're doing your training. So
Right. Because we all find ourselves in situations where the loudest voices tend to prevail, right? Or
yes,
the most extroverted people. And we've learned that introverts have just as much to offer, but will hold back at times, right? Because they don't want to make waves. And this that software you use, that Padlet thing, that was very cool. I was a part of that. Very neat. All right, Ehren, you're up. Passing the baton.
Yeah, I love that too, and that we were talking about it briefly before, and I just like right away that like to me that screams like first opening session at pre-camp, like getting people comfortable. Everyone's reserved at that first session, and how do you just get staff talking and get the conversation going, and that's a great way to turn a thought and bring the world of the phone into the world of reality, as Andy was mentioning. So I love that. It's great. I'm gonna definitely find a way to implement that right off the bat. So one thing that we talked about also, obviously the Generation Z, as we say in Canada, and there was there was a bit of a mental health discussion that I was a part of. Something that we talked about was, I mean, it was part of a roundtable session, and something we talked about was stress and the management of stress, and the fact that there's positive stress, there's tolerable stress, there's toxic levels of stress, and parents obviously are doing their best to keep their kids away from stressful situations these days. And so there's benefits to these some of these situations, as I learned, and being stressed out from time to time is completely healthy and positive. Creates positive positive responses for people. But something that I took away from this discussion was that our structured the structured environment of camp is often, or the environment that we run, whether it's a free play camp that has free play built into a structured schedule, as we talked about a couple episodes ago, or a camp that's every minute of every day is completely structured and prescribed. That structure is healthy for kids, and might be the only opportunity they have to to get to be in a structured environment outside of the classroom. So it often it's often associated just with there were some studies that were discussed, but associated just with really lowered anxiety and lowered stress levels, and better coping skills overall. Just that idea of having a structured environment at camp. So that was interesting to me, because something that's like, it goes without saying that the environment's going to be structured, but relieving mental health concerns is another benefit that we can sell when we market camp, right? So
Yeah.
So that was good. That was good, and I could talk for a while about this, but it's not that engaging, especially since I'm not a scientist. But I did love what I was learning here. So
Yeah, no, it's cool. So the opening keynote at ACA National was Wendy Mogul, the author who wrote The Blessings of a Skinned Knee. And she's turned a little bit into a stand-up comic, but she did have some good nuggets of information. One of the things she said, which really resonated with me, is that camp is radically counterculture now compared to regular life of people, right? That this generation of parents are so used to controlling every aspect of their kids that camp, think about what a camp, letting go of your kids, handing them off to strangers, right? The parents being completely out of control of their kids, right? Kids' lives in schools being achievement-based, right? The fact that most kids nowadays don't have chores, they don't clean up, they don't do anything, right? They're just too busy doing all these hobbies and schoolwork and lessons and stuff like that. The lack of dealing with challenges, right? That kids come to camp, they're dealing with annoying campers, extreme heat, liquid sunshine, right? If they were with their parents, they'd be protected from those things, right? Just being around bodies of water and fire, right, is so different. And being confused about stuff, right? A lot of these kids, they're protected from even that, and these are all great for kids' development, and they're all something they get from camp. And I just thought that was really, really super cool. Wendy Mogul, Mogel is her last name. She's got a great website. She's got an article called "We Speak to Little Boys as We Speak to Little Dogs," which is hilarious. That's what I just read. She's got a blog called Overparenting Anonymous, which is also pretty amazing. So look her up. Check it out.
Our last, go ahead.
go ahead. No, go
Our
ahead.
last keynote, Dr. Eels was talking about resilience, and he brought up a book. He did a quote from a book, and it turned out it was a book I was reading on the plane, and I wasn't to that part yet, so he spoiler alerted me to the end of my book. But the book was Viktor Frankl, A Man's Search for Meaning, and just talked about you can survive the worst circumstances if you know what it is that is the meaning in your life, or what your goals are, what you're headed towards. So that was interesting. I
Yeah.
also found out there is a new seizure medicine made from marijuana oil. That was kind of an interesting tidbit that we might be seeing coming down the road.
Mhm.
But
We had there were some topics, some sessions dealing with marijuana as well at the Canadian conference, and with the legalization of it in Canada, it became a pertinent topic because denying people the right to consume it has become a bit of a human rights issue. So we're talking about managing that in the context of camp, and how that's going to affect what we do. And obviously finding marijuana in the past was a huge a reason to remove someone from the environment, from the setting, and fire them if they were a staff member, call their parents if they were a child. And now it's a different approach that might have to be taken with that. So we're still talking about that. Fortunately, in day camp, it might not come into play that often, but definitely for the residential camps, they have an issue with that on their hands.
Yeah. Well, I mean, from a time I've spent in Colorado, it is pretty amazing how they treat it very much just like alcohol. And if you really just put in the same restrictions as you would put in with alcohol, it seems to have worked out relatively well there, even though you can eat it and all that kind of stuff. And, it makes it tough to track. So the best session I went to at ACA National was definitely a multi-generational communication session given by Dr. G. Gilboa, who is an amazing presenter. I just think this is such an important topic in camping, and especially for us, understanding this Gen Z or Gen Z, as Ehren called it, because they're so wired so differently than the Gen X and baby boomers, which are that tend to be the camp directors. So some stuff on our friends, the Gen Z, quickly become the experts. We always hear that. But they say that for Gen Z, camp is a very, very interesting thing for them because, like Wendy Mogul was saying, it's so different than the day-to-day. You can't Google answers at camp. You can't ask your parents for help at camp. These are things that Gen Z do all the time. And it really, it's like they're on the moon at first, as far as like being able to survive from the things that they're used to. They're always on, Gen Z, right? Think about it. They always are hooked from the moment they wake up to the moment they go to sleep. They are connected, right? And camp gives them, we need to teach them how to unplug and how to actually chill at times because they're not used to that. They're used to just always being connected, right?
And problem solving.
Yeah. They can create a meme just as popular as one created by like Jay-Z or anyone else famous or interesting or smart, right? They're in this world where their creativity can be something that can be, seen by everybody and be popular just like anybody else, all right? Whereas prior generations, it was like, oh, unless you're famous kind of thing, right? But you can be viral about something, just if you're really creative about it, right? Great self-starters, they value uniqueness, great at sharing, right? And ways of collaborating because of all the social media stuff that they do, and group me's and all that kind of stuff like that. Honesty and authenticity are big deals with them, which I talk about all the time. But then going back to the parents, and she called them drone parents. She said it used to be that no news was good news about your kids, right? So think about the Wendy Mogul thing that we're taking them, you're giving them off to strangers and then you don't hear anything, right? So for parents of my generation and older, used to be no news is good news. And today, no news means likely dead. So parents need practice in dealing with that pit in their stomach, right? Of not knowing everything, right? And Wendy Mogul had said that that feeling when you're at the playground, you're watching your kid climb up this ladder and it's going one rung too high, that like for your comfort level, and you get that horrible feeling in your stomach. She goes, that's parenting. That's what people got to get used to. I love that. So what Dr. G was saying is that camp might be parents' only opportunity to let kids trip and fall and gain independence without them being around in this modern world that we live in, right? It used to be, when I was a kid, my mom was literally like, come home when the streetlights come on, right? But that doesn't exist anymore. Anyway, it might be like send your kids to camp to get that kind of feeling. She talked about how communication and how we communicate to them. That well, talking about their parents now, who are these millennials, that they just want to text, right? Gen X just wants to email. Millennials just want to text. She said so much so that the doorbell business is suffering because people don't use doorbells. Because I show up at Ehren's house and I text him and I said, Ehren, I'm here. And he says, okay, just come in. He texts me back, right? They don't use doorbells. You know, I've had many millennials say to me, can you just text me? Like, stop talking. Can you just text me? Kind of
I
thing.
find it scary when someone knocks on my door now because nobody does.
You didn't tell me you were coming?
Right, right. And, you know, we've talked about with communication that giving people cell phone numbers is just not a big deal anymore. That's just how people communicate with each other, right? So Gen Z is also known as Gen Y, WHY, right? Because why? Because we've constantly been asking them their opinions their whole damn lives, all right? That's why they're like that, right? And when they ask why to you, they're not being disrespectful, they're being engaging, right? That's how they engage, right? They're not good at written stuff, so your counselors are going to get worse and worse at writing things, right? And we've already started seeing, and they hate it, right? They want you to give them high expectations, but they want you to hold them to it. All right. Don't just give them high expectations, right? And then this was the sort of the high point of Deb's session. She was talking about how in this new generation, that whole safe zone idea, right, of feeling safe, right, how it's really been blown out of proportion, as we all know. And the whole being uncomfortable has now been translated to being unsafe, right? Right? I've had it many times. Like a kid, even my kids bust my chops about it. Oh, I don't feel safe. I don't feel safe, right? What they're really trying to say is I don't feel comfortable, right? And meanwhile, think about what we do at camp, how we're trying to put people out of their comfort zones, right? Because that's how you grow, right? So I think that's an opportunity for us at camp to get them and get our parents to understand that your kids feeling uncomfortable is actually, that's when they grow best, right? Deb said that discomfort equals growth, right? Leads to growth. That kids and people heal best when they're safe, but they grow best when they're uncomfortable. So, mic drop. Deb Gilboa. Great job. I love that.
I love that, you know, we're all still on the same page in terms of, you know, providing these experiences for kids and not trying to, you know, not trying to avoid them or work, you know, work around them. Like, this is what we do, and this is what we're trying to change our messaging and trying to provide, you know, a justification for not, you know, allowing kids to use their cell phones, for example, at camp. But you know, it's great that, you know, we're still, you know, when we go to these conferences and we can talk about strategies to you know, to make the messaging appeal to a wider range of people, but we're still delivering that message of independence, you know, outdoors, you know, getting a scraped knee, because that's how you learn and that's how you grow. So, you know, I love that we're still doing that, and that's what makes it worthwhile.
Yeah,
A segue from that, I didn't realize my last session I went to was about the International Camping Conference coming up in October 2020 in China. I had no idea that they just started doing camp in 2011. They didn't even start a camp, I don't think, till 2014. They just got the idea in 2011. And so they're hoping to get 500 speakers and 10,000 participants to this in Beijing in October. And the guy dropped your name, Andy. I don't know if you talked to him at some point during the conference, but during his spiel, he was like, yeah, guys like Jim Kane and Andy Pritikin are, you know, talking about coming. Did you even talk to him?
No, but I do know a lot of those guys from China, and I have spoken
Yeah.
there before. I spoke at the first camp conference they had about 4 or 5 years ago now, and it was really super cool.
That is cool.
And yeah, I mean, you think about those numbers, they sound like a lot, Sam, but just remember that there's 1.5 billion people in China, right? 1.5 billion people, right? That Beijing by itself has like 50 million people or something like that, you know?
But like you said, Ehren, they're doing the same message we're doing now. They're catching up with that, and they're bringing over Americans as the hot commodity.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
Yeah.
also, you know, the interesting thing to me about
Or Canadians.
Chinese camp industry is that they recognize right away that that camp is about teaching like character skills and social skills. They get that. In China, there's plenty of smart 1.5 billion people. They got more smart people in China than we have people in America. Okay, and they recognize that camp is important, and that they're while they're really smart, they need work with their social skills because they know that one day there's a 12-year-old in class in Shanghai right now that's going to have to deal with a 12-year-old that's in class in Chicago right now. And they're going to have to talk to each other and work with each other, right? So they're committed to building these kids' social skills up. So one thing they did is when they created the camp industry back then, Sam, in 2011, whatever,
Yeah,
they didn't call it summer camp. They call it camp education. That is what they call it, right? And that's
nice.
what the characters say, and that's what they put out there for their parents. So they're starting, like, to me, ahead of the game because they understand and recognize that camp is about teaching life skills, right? And they're all about it, right? So
It's very interesting, and that's you know part of the approach that you know we've taken when we reach out to the newcomers like from China that live in Canada, and we're trying to promote camp, and you know we've you know followed that messaging, and they didn't have, many of them didn't, you know, what now that the industry is becoming established in China or starting to become established, you know they may not have heard about it until they came to Canada. So you know, we're working on tweaking our message to be more in line with what the what the Chinese are doing from the outset in their industry and their segment of the industry, and I think it's it's great for both groups of, you know, whether it's the Asian community or the people who have been you know just lost to the idea of going to camp, you know, that have been living here for generations, right? They might just be lost to it because they don't have the right, you know, we haven't delivered the right message or the right,
yeah,
we haven't
haven't hit the right
sold the
chord.
benefits. Yeah, yeah. So
And
I love that everyone's taking a different approach.
Ehren, I noticed that the International Camp Conference has been in Canada twice already. You guys were like the
Yeah,
very first one, and then like 6 years later or something. But it's been,
yes.
yeah,
Yeah, I think that was what I mentioned at the beginning was that there was a spot there. Oh, actually, no, sorry, that wasn't the first one. Never mind. But I know that I haven't been to one, but they do them in. Yeah, they do have those. They did have them in other provinces, not in Ontario. So didn't have the benefit of attending myself. But I heard that there's some amazing collaboration. There's some major differences, and yet, you know, it's funny how, you know, everybody is doing the same thing essentially, right? So
yeah.
it's great to collaborate. And you know, on that note, I wanted to ask you guys, because I'm going to be heading to the Tri-State Conference in a few weeks, and the conference that the two of you were just at is the national conference, and I know that there's a large, you know, it covers the entire country, and the Tri-State is only sort of the Tri-State area camps, but tends to draw people from across the country. So do you know what are some of the differences? What are some of the draws? Why is it, you know, why is one, or what are the differences?
So ACA National is great. You know, it really does get people from all over the country because they see it as the national conference, and you do get a lot of more Girl Scouts and YMCA representation, and these national organizations are very well represented at national. Tri-State, yes, it started as a New York tri-state area, so New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania kind of thing, but it really is grown much more than that. I mean, we get people from every state, we get people from countries all over the world. It is the largest gathering of camp professionals in the world. So just as a comparison, not that size means anything as far as quality, but the national conference, I think, had 1,600 people this year. It was a record crowd, right? So Tri-State usually has close to 4,000 attendees. Tri-State has, you know, close in the upper 700s So it's a lot of people. And I think that the New York mentality is one of like, give me my information now kind of thing. So it's a little less warm and fuzzy and a little more like relevant and important kind of vibe kind of thing. There's a lot of very, very smart people out there who really don't, who don't go nationally or travel around, but they go to Tri-State because they're in that area. And people who have been running camps for, whose organizations have been around for 100 years. So a lot of like long-standing camps too. I think my friend Steve Baskin said to me one time, he said it was pretty funny, but true. He said that at ACA National, you leave and you feel like really uplifted and inspired to go, go on with camping. I said at Tri-State, you leave and you think of all the ways that you can get sued. And so it's not that drastic, but there is some relevancy to that.
And then there's the Mid-States Conference, which is all the Midwest. And it started off being the conference that you could bring your staff to, because there's the entrance fee covers 5 people. But there's a lot more for directors now as well, trying to get away from that. This is just for staff. But usually there's around 800 to 900 people at that one as well. So there's some good ones out there.
Just like Mid-States, Tri-State is also priced that way. So it's like $400 for 5 people, right? Which is a really awesome way to bring your people. Yeah. And also Atlantic City can be a relatively cheap place to find a hotel room. So it's an affordable conference at Tri-State. So you would think New York, New Jersey, wow, it's going to be expensive. And actually, no, it's a very affordable thing. But the one thing you sold yourself short, Sam, about the Mid-State Conference is that the first day of the Mid-State Conference is the day camp.
Yes.
Day, right?
Michael
it's a specific
Brandwein.
Day camp conference day, which I've spoken at before. And that Michael Brandwein is on the program committee and helps curate. And it's an amazing one-day, all-day camp fest. Right. Yeah. So when is that day, Sam?
April 1st. And our first speaker is Dr. Dana Winters from the Fred Rogers Institute. And she's going to start us off. And we've got a choice of 3 then. And then we come back for getting your staff to wear their big boy pants all together. And then you have a choice of 10 you can go to. And then you come back for Michael at the very end of the day. So you get some exhibit hall time. If you can only come that day, that whole day is all day camp, and you still get a piece of everything that goes on. But it also covers the other 2 days if you want to stay.
Awesome. And if you mention the day camp pod at registration, you will get a high five. Well, we should definitely have pins or something for people to put on it at that point. All right, we're running out of time, folks. I want to thank Ehren and Sam. All right, and all the people who were at the Ontario and National Camp Conferences, all the folks that were the sponsors of those conferences, all the people that were the speakers, all the people that were in hospitality, right? You guys really make it work, and you make it an awesome event for the attendees. Thank you so much.
And there's a lot of volunteers that make it possible. So that's great too.
Totally. And I also want to thank one of our sponsors, AM Skyer, the leading insurance broker for the finest camps of America for over 100 years, almost 100 years. AM Skyer has been a strategic partner with summer camps, ready to support any needs arising from PR, legal, health, facility, and more. Experience the AM Skyer difference. All right, so we will be back in a couple of weeks from now. Our next episode will be with my friend Twigs Johnson from Nashville. You can check out our show notes and other episodes at daycamppodcast.com. All right. Subscribe to us on iTunes, all that kind of stuff. Thank you for listening, and have a great day.